Much of what is discovered now, will of course be secret. We will not be given the full answer. As the world continues to explore the secrets of this atomic age.
It's time to find out with Diego. Let's go. Ooh, yeah.
Greetings, fellow travelers. As the week reaches its thrilling midpoint, we're broadcasting from the mountains of West Virginia. Embrace the spirit of adventure as you join us on this daring journey through the untamed wilderness of Let's Find Out with Diego, Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. With over 2 decades of diverse expertise under his belt, our guest creates captivating tales to life and fearlessly dives into various creative realms with multiple exciting projects, including not one but 2 thrilling young adult urban fantasy book series and working on the 3rd adult fantasy science fiction with Omega Quest. Our guest will also venture into the television universe and completing a pilot for the Jonas Blackstone book, The Protector's Ring. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, author, screenwriter, and independent filmmaker, John Darr. John, my friend, welcome to the show, man. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now.
And thank you for inviting me. For a second when you first started, I didn't realize you were talking about me.
Oh my, no, come on now.
Who's this? This sounds good.
Man, it sounded like one of those. I don't remember back in the old days in the 80s and 70s when the narrator's just selling that movie.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's where my influence came from. That's one of the reasons I brought you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading over your biography or your bio here. I don't even know where to start, but I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to start with it all began with your love of science fiction, just like me. I'm a science fiction geek.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in the times where I watched a lot of the old, like 50s, 60s, and then 70s and 80s sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people call it old. For me, it's not that long ago. And, I grew up watching the Battlestar Galactica, Beastmaster, Buck Rogers, V.
So you're giving me goosebumps.
And that's the thing about these types of conversations. It can go anywhere because we all have our favorites. And I know that there's some movies that they'll come on TV and it'll sucker me and I'll stay in the house and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it begin with you?
I'm not kidding you. I really got goosebumps when you mentioned some of those shows because it's like, oh my gosh, he's naming all the ones where I came of age with. But I also, some of the older ones like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. In fact, I was just at a model shop and my best friend likes that movie and they had a really good replica of that submarine. And so I bought it for him and gave it to him as a birthday present. I like that. Lost in Space. I'm also a music head, not in terms of I was trained classically as a pianist, so and I played in bands in high school bands and things like that. So the music also got me too. So I love the themes for Buck Rogers. I mean, I remember seeing when they released it in the theater and they had like that James Bond opening on it, which you can't find. Battlestar Galactica. When it first premiered, my dad used to come home and watch 60 Minutes on Sunday night. So I caught it right before the Cylon attack. And back in those days, you had to wait to see it again. But then when they released it in the theaters, I don't know if you saw it when they released it in the theaters. Oh my gosh, the sound in that thing when all the explosions are going off around the ship. I was just always fascinated with that. I was also fascinated with stories which were placed in the real world, but they had unusual things. So I had a love for that. I had a love for grounded fantasy. Of course, Star Wars comes out and it just, and then Superman comes out and it's like, and then it's John Williams doing the score and then it's Jerry Goldsmith doing Star Trek. It's like those 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, that was like golden for iconic, different sci-fi movies. When Dune came out, and then I realized it was a book, and I went to the library, and it's like not just a book. There's like 7 books on this shelf. I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store.
You mentioned that silent attack on Battlestar Galactica.
Mm-hmm.
You gave me goosebumps because when that series first came out, I think it was like an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And for its time, and I think it still stands to the test of time. That was a really hardcore storytelling because they show no mercy. There's like no hope within the colony. Once they launched all the ships was remaining on that planet and try to traverse through space to try to find Earth. Man, what a gut-wrenching storyline.
Things like that. Again, I'm getting these goosebumps. I don't know why. Things like that in the larger than life story, in the search for truth, the search for home, it just resonated with me. I think even on a spiritual level. You know, we're on a search for Earth, you know, and a new home. I love that, which is one of the things that I had a problem with the newest one. I have my loves and hates of the new one, but that aspect when they in the very first TV movie they said, oh, well, you know, Earth is, you know, that's just a military. That's a lie we told. It doesn't really exist. It's like, what are you doing? You're taking the heart out of it. You know? But yeah, those things resonated with me, and I think it informs my writing. I like epic. I like multi-volumes. I'll read standalone. I've read plenty of standalones, but I like I said, when I went to the library and I saw that Dune wasn't just one book, it was like 7 books. It's like, okay, I'm ready to dig in and see what this is really about. And I've always liked reading the books as well as seeing how the difference they did with the movies. And I guess that informs what I do now because of the route that I took in my life was the film side, doing, you know, that working, being a producer and thing like that. But then when it came to writing, I was going to try to write my scripts first. And I said, well, wait a minute, I want to tell the stories first. And I remember Battlestar Galactica. I remember Babylon 5 had some of the greatest character arcs that you've ever seen. Somebody has a dream in the first season, then in season 4, you see the realization of that. So for me, and I noticed that like Chris Carter with X-Files and Straczynski, story by, and it's like, they know the story first, then they do the scripts. And so I backed up from trying to write my stories to Jonas Blackstone. I did a little short that introduced his parents. But everybody asked me, okay, well, they have a son. So what about the son? And so that became Jonas Blackstone. But I backed up and said, let me write the books first. Let me build that world with the freedom of writing the books. And then I will go back and do the screenplays. And so I've gone through that 10-year journey plus, and now I'm coming back around to writing the screenplays for these works.
And for your works, because what was life before that? Because I asked that because I'm assuming that while you were getting your BA in communications, were you writing heavily at that point too? Because I'm looking at it because that's what I'm saying. You have to like sit down and study all this stuff and pass the exams and all these things. So the writing came afterwards as well as the filmmaking?
Filmmaking came first because I was doing my BA in communications, but I have always been a creative person. It runs in my family. And when I was there, I would be the one that would edit our projects in television. And it was real, and our community college was really weak on the television side. It was communication. So, you know, they did all the corporate communications, comparative religion, they did all of that stuff. And there was only 1 or 2 really video production. And so I always felt shafted, but I took that and I went straight into doing video production and, you know, working at the station. But my professors would always say to me, you picked the perfect music for your thing, because I was mixing my music interest. I was, you know, playing piano and stuff like that in groups and in choir and stuff. So for me, I went straight into working, and I worked for independent cable access. So we had to do everything. Those, we had to do the commercials. At one point, and it was religious based. So I was in communication with the record companies, Warner Alliance and all of those that would do all the contemporary Christian and traditional and stuff like that. So I'm getting tapes from them. I'm putting them into the rotation and stuff. And then I'm giving them reports and the feedback. I'm doing all of this in my first job out of college. So I'm a writer, I'm a producer, I'm a set dresser. I have to go out, I have to go on location and record stuff, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm just out of college. So I'm going heavy deep into that type of thing, then in corporate. But that creative bug was still burning in me. And I remember the day that I decided I'm going to go and get my creative filmmaking thing and go to graduate film school. And that was when I was watching It was either Dark Crystal or it was one of the Muppet movies. And I was watching the credits and I was looking at the list of all the people producing it. And I remember that this something came over me, and it's like, I want to be a creative. I don't want to do these videos for a corporate person that has no imagination. You try to do something funny, and then when you go to show the video to them, they're sitting there. I don't get it. It's like, ah. And so I needed an outlet for my creativity. So that's when I went to film school. And it was once I went to film school and I learned behind the scenes how to put a production together. It was at that time I was introduced to script writing, and that brought me back around to storytelling. I had never considered myself being a novelist. I was going to do a screenwriter since it was closely related to what I majored in. And so that was my journey afterwards.
And it's a rare thing. One person comes to mind when not only did they write the scripts and make the movies, but they also wrote the music to a lot of their movies. First, if I get it wrong, I know I'm going to get the emails and they're going to point at me and laugh. But John Carpenter, because he wrote some amazing stuff for his movies, which really set the tone for each scene. And one of my favorites was like Escape from New York, because he wrote all the music for that too, and very important. So, how much of that is you when in a point to where, kind of like me with this podcast, I do everything. Editing, I write the script for the intros, promotion, and sometimes I'm like, do I bring somebody in to help? Are you do you just do it all yourself? Like, are you so obsessed with that project like I am?
I don't want to do it with myself. And I would say that when you're working in corporate, you might have one or two other people that work with you, but I've always been, it's funny, I've always been even for my first job, I was almost labeled as a producer. It was weird because I was working with small companies. So they had you do everything. One of the great things about going to film school was learning how collaborative film is. And like so many of the people, they wanted to be directors. I never wanted to be a director. I wanted to be a producer. And so for me, I don't want to do it on my own. I understand the benefit of having other people do things. And as I get older,
Yeah.
And in my process, because I know you want to talk about that, in my process, I've gone back to really defining each step in what I do, whether I'm writing something or whether I'm putting a video together for my YouTube channel. I went back to breaking things down so that I can inhabit each one of those roles and not try to wear all the hats at the same time, because that's when you drive yourself crazy. And as I do that, I realize that as I go back and I really break these things down, it's much easier for me to get somebody to come in and do audio engineering for me, or get somebody in to come in as an assistant editor and assemble all the stuff for me, so that when I sit down to edit, it's all there. So and I think that's where I'm moving to where I can go from I can do it all myself, which I know I can't, to bringing somebody else in.
I get it's an inner struggle sometimes because there's a thing of where I have my own deadlines. If I don't meet my own deadlines, I'm hard on myself. I'm thinking if somebody else has to meet those deadlines, can I be as hard on them as me? But no, that's a whole different conversation down the road. So during this journey from school, filmmaking, when did Jonas Blackstone come into the picture?
In my last year at graduate film school, I had a friend who had a short story and he didn't want to do anything with it. And so I took it, I looked at it, I reworked it so that it worked. And what it became a story of this guy have you ever seen the show Dead Like Me?
I have not.
I always ask people about it, and I know there's some other shows like that. Basically what happens with Dead Like Me, if you don't finish what you were supposed to finish during your life, then you're made a reaper, and you have to go, and at other people's time, you have to lead them to their final destination. And in the process, you finally learn what you didn't learn as a mortal, and then finally it's your time to move on. And so I like that aspect. And so there was a story about this guy. That's what he was doing. But I think he had there was the soul of this young woman, and he did not want to reap her soul. And so because he doesn't reap her soul, he's put it on trial. And this is a short film I actually did. and he's put on trial. If he survives, then he becomes a human again, and blah, blah, blah. If he doesn't, then he's cast into outer darkness or whatever. He survives the trial. Both he and her are put in this special version of reality, and they survive the trial overnight. And at the end, he becomes a human, and they fall in love and they have a kid. People at the end of that say, well, what happened to the kid? We want to know about the kid. That kid became Jonas Blackstone. And that story became the story of his parents. So theoretically, the story of his parents was done way before Jonas Blackstone ever came along. And so that became Jonas Blackstone. But it was like, 10 years later where I finally sat down and I finally started writing Jonas Blackstone, because it kept nagging me. I was going to do a version of the television show about the parents, but one of the problems is, well, they know everything. How are you going to introduce the audience to the world if the people in the world know everything? You know, it's that classic George Lucas problem with the prequels, where everybody's talking about stuff that they know. The audience needs the information. And it kept bothering me. And it's like, okay, this thing about the kids. So I just sat down, a la the author that people don't want to mention, but JK, I just used the initials. And I just, for fun of it, I just wrote out book titles and Jonas Blackstone and the Children of Light, Jonas Blackstone and the Protector's Ring, Jonas Blackstone and the Destiny Medallion. I just wrote down 5 titles and just left it, and it kept playing with me. And finally it's like, you know what? Something's telling you, write this kid's story. And because he's raised outside of the supernatural world, as he learns about it, then the readers learn about it. And so that was the genesis of Jonas Blackstone. And I remember writing that first book. And I don't know if you know the story of the guy who wrote, I forget which one it was, but there was a guy who wrote an entire movie. No, a novel. Was it a novel? In an entire night. And he kept taking breaks, and he would come downstairs and he was crying. His wife was asking what's going on. He says, because the story's just getting to me. I remember writing the first Jonas Black, the first draft, rough draft, first time I ever wrote a novel. But I'm good because it's something that you mentioned. I've been lucky in my life. I've been used to deadlines, doing creative stuff on a deadline. So when I start something, I'm okay to finish it. When I got down to the end of that book, I was pretty much every day. When I got down to the end of the book, those characters took me on a journey. I was emotional. I was wrung out. Okay. And it's like, wow.
So Jonas Blackstone has become a living figure in your mind. Now,
yes. Mm-hmm.
As I look at the beautiful cover of the book, I'm seeing Jonas Blackstone's going through a lot in his life and discovery. What kind of dangers? What is he going through right now?
Right now, we're in the first book.
Wherever you want to start. I'll say with the first book, because we don't want to, move too far forward.
Okay, yeah. In the first book, like I said, Jonah he's going through a lot because he loses his parents. I think it says it on the cover, so I'm not revealing anything. He loses his parents when on his 13th birthday. You got to work those little things in there. And so he's really dealing with that. And he's also dealing with parents who had not brought him into the supernatural world yet. And so he's stuck with a godfather who's also a fallen supernatural. So fallen supernaturals, once you were a reaper, when you're on the other side, you saw human beings at their worst. So when you become a human again, you're a little different. You're a little off. So he has a very withdrawn godfather. And then Jonah himself, and this was very important to me because this is part of me. Jonah is an introvert. And I think too many times, one of the things I don't like, we always write these YA male characters as these extroverts. They're going to go do this and do this. Jonah is an introvert. He needs his time to decompress. But if he's going to do something, then he gets impatient and he wants to do it. And he's a hero at heart. And so as he goes through the book, he has to get used to people gravitating around him. He's the center of attention, and that's something that he has to struggle with. He has to get used to. And it was really important for me to write that because I think like 30 or 40% of the population is introvert. I think it's even greater for people who read books. I mean, you got to dedicate time to read a book, And so I wouldn't be surprised if it's reversed and it's like 70% of book readers are introvert. And so I thought it was nice to give not only that, but he's a black kid. So you see a Black kid, and he's also an introvert. And I think it's nice to give that. And I've seen young people across the board of all races and cultures respond positively to Jonas Blackstone. So, to me, that's a touch of realness. Is something that touches my core. And I thought it was important to have that. So that's his struggle, finding out what's going on, but also having to deal with being the center of attention when he would rather stand back in the corner and observe,
Oh, I completely understand, especially at such a young age where you're still trying to figure out life. Not only are you trying to figure out life, but now your parents are gone. And talking about people paying attention to you, that could be a very uncomfortable feeling for, I guess, any person, especially a young person in your story. Now, we were talking about dedicating time to reading. And I think there was a time, and I know it depends on the author, where they'll have these dedicated readers. They'll read anything they put out, which they're great authors. Of course they would. During the pandemic, I think there was a couple things happened. Creators started creating more because they had time. People started reading more because they had more time. And I'll be completely transparent with you. The reason I got into podcasting is because during the pandemic, nobody was allowed to go to work, or you could go every other week. This is how I got started. So it's unfortunate that it happened, but there's some upside to where now people really want to get a hands on these types of stories.
Yeah, I saw that too. For me, same thing. You're locked at home. I was at that point. I was actually a technology coordinator for the school system. So I changed from being a video producer to that. So my hands were full, but I had time, and so I was able to sit down and really move forward on four different novels. But without even advertising, I saw an increase of the audiobook sales of that book and the one for my coming of age series. So yeah, people were really looking for material, and it hasn't gone anywhere. I know for me and the other, the Black sci-fi and fiction and fantasy writers here in Atlanta and the group, it was a big spike then, but it's still a spike, and people are still looking for the diverse material. And if they find us at the cons, people will come up and buy a boatload of books from us. So that's refreshing. People are still looking for new, they're looking for fresh, they're looking for different. They like that. Real readers like the fact that they can now delve into something that might be from a different perspective that they're not used to, particularly when you have the industry always, and I don't know about books, but definitely for film, they keep doing retreads.
Oh my goodness, don't even start with that. Yeah.
And for me, and even for when it comes to for each one of my books, I told somebody, not to sound like George Lucas, but I want to feel that each one of my books is different. The Jonas Blackstone books, it takes people in different places. It's not a by the numbers, even though you can do the same basic structure every time. I want each book to feel different. I want it to take people in different places. And so that's, I don't say it's a challenge that is hard, but it's just something that I want to do because I like that. I like revisiting the characters, but I don't want to have the same story each time.
No, because even in, now it's the generic term, real life, every year is different. Almost every day is different in your life. So the story can't always be the same because you're either going to progress or regress. So that's part of the adventure of life. And I'm assuming that the character's going through the same trials and tribulations as most kids his age would go. But now with the Jonas Blackstone book, and now you're delving into, I guess, introducing a pilot about the character. And I know it's still writing, but I know the process is vastly different. So how are you balancing where you find the time, and how does this process go as far as creating a pilot and then you're going to have to pitch it?
On the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. It is finding the time. I think with me, I can do different stages of all of these, but I'm not that big of a person who can jump from one writing project in a day, go to another one, and then go to another one. For me, I typically like to focus on an individual one. And so for the pilot, again, like I said, I recognized that I had reached that point. I got to the point where I said I wanted to have at least 5 books out, 3 Jonas Blackstone and series. That's the coming of age novellas. Once I reached that, I realized I was slightly at a stopping point. And so it was that I sat down and I wrote a screenplay for the first book adaptation. I wrote a screenplay for one of the novellas, and I even got an emerging talent award for that one. But then I always wanted to do series. And so that's when I sat down and I wrote the Jonas Blackstone, the pilot for the first one. And that's a process in and of itself. I'm currently helping some of the other writers convert some of their short stories into short movies. You know, one of the interesting things, I know we as book readers complain when we go see and sometimes we scratch our head when we see that the author was one of the, contributing producers. They were there, and it's like, I understand now. Because sometimes you can emphasize something that you wish you could have emphasized in the book. And like doing the pilot, I realized Jonas Blackstone is from a third person Jonas point of view. So it's anything outside of happening directly with him, you have to find ways for him to know about it. In the pilot, suddenly, I can delve into the conversation between his dad and his mom before the last time they saw him and they went off. And that is very interesting for me. You kind of sort of know what's going on and you have snatches of it, but now you can delve fully into these other things. Kind of the same thing that happened with the Katniss, what's that? Hunger Games. I think the book was from her point of view, first person, but the directors and people who wrote the movie, they realized the importance of going into the villain's point of view and having separate scenes. When you discover that you can do that and you go with the visual shorthand, you don't have to explain everything. You go with visual shorthand. You go with the essence of a scene. I start to have a new appreciation for people who've done adaptations. I'm not so harsh on the screenwriters anymore.
I guess once you learn how, kind of they say, how the sausage is made,
Yeah.
there's so many aspects you're not really prepared for. And while you're creating the pilot, will you also be writing the music for it as well?
Oh, no. I play music. I'm not a music writer, but I do consider myself a music editor. I am, and I forget what the term is, but I'm the person who's when I hear audio, it elicits vision and images to me. Like there is a sequence that's going to come up in a future book. I don't know if it's going to be, because I'm working on book 4 and 5 of Jonas Blackstone is a duology, it's a 2-parter. I don't know if it's going to come up in book 6 or 7, but there is music that in my head, I see the perfect scene for a future event that happens in the Jonas Blackstone series. And when I'm seeing it as how I'm going to write it. I'm also seeing it as how it would be if it was actually a TV episode. And so I have to watch that because I get far ahead of myself, but music just does that to me. It sends me down that road. I don't know if you ever seen it. I don't know if you ever heard of fan videos.
Yes.
When I caught on to fan videos, somebody showed me Cher, If I Could Turn Back Time, and it was a Star Trek episode. And when I saw that, it like blew my mind. It's like, people do this and they show it at conventions. And I started doing that. And for me, the idea of taking music and reusing it for something else and synthesizing another set of images in the music and creating something different, to me, that kind of creativity always applies to me. So when I hear pieces of music, particularly I listen to orchestrated music from sci-fi movies and shows and stuff like that. My playlist, my Apple playlist is just full of stuff like that. I'll often listen to those types of things when I'm writing, and it will inform what I'm writing because then I visualize it slightly different.
No, it's true. If somebody were just to throw away the whole concept of the movie and listen to the soundtracks, I'm not talking about with singing or anything. I'm going back to Battlestar Galactica. When you hear the soundtrack to Battlestar Galactica, it's a whole different animal. It's the same thing like if you were listening to the soundtrack to Conan the Barbarian,
Mm-hmm.
the soundtrack to, I mean, I'll even say Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
or things like that. The type of music score that you choose,
Mm-hmm.
it makes or breaks the movie in a way, I think. This is my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and for narrative fiction, when I'm putting scenes like that together, I could feel the flow. But I am a music editor and I love music. But when I was doing the corporate video and educational videos, if we had access to a music library, I look forward to going in, sitting down, listening to all the music and waiting for something to really hit me. And when it hit me, then I started to see how I could edit the piece. I even do it now with the videos I do. Once I find the music and I start putting the music in, I start shifting stuff around. For me, music is an integral part of it. Even when I get ready for my writing sessions, I have like a playlist of music, and it might be Ilia's theme from Star Trek. I love that. It might be Can You Read My Mind? The orchestrated one, not the one with Margot Kidder singing. There's a track from the Fantastic Beasts. I think it was James Newton Howard did that. Another fantastic composer. I will have stuff like that that'll get me into that move, and it'll transition me from whatever I was doing into my writing session. And so I just call it my writing list, my writing music list. And so yeah, it's really important for me. My most fervent dream is the day when I walk into the scoring session and I'm sitting in that booth behind the audio engineers and I'm listening to some composer who's composed original music, and I'm watching Jonas Blackstone up on the screen and he's putting them. I know I'm going to cry like a baby. I'm just telling you now.
Oh, I don't blame you, because once everything gets put together, I think it's like, this came from my mind. It's it's very satisfying. Almost, I mean, in a way where you write the book, it gets published, they send you a box to your house, you open it, you have the book in your hand. That's got to be an amazing feeling.
And one of the other amazing feelings too is equal to that, because I know you had mentioned mentioned about the writing process. When I did the audio book for the first Jonas Blackstone, the first time I heard because the guy who read it, he kind of did the voices. The first time I heard Jonah's father speak, goosebumps. It's like, oh my gosh, that's Jonah's dad. And then you get the same thing when you do a table read on a screenplay. I mean, once I do the table read with this screenplay, it's going to be the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh, these characters are coming to life again, for me.
It's amazing. And when the time comes, the pilot gets green lighted and it's going to make it. Who do you feel? I mean, if you can use a new actor, but if so, let's talk about a street level actor, and someone say, this is the person that will play the main character in my book. Who do you think would be?
That's difficult, because the first book came out 11 years ago. So over that time, it's changed. You see somebody, and I would say to my friend, he make a perfect Jonas Blackstone. But then that person grows over 10 years. Somebody that young, they look totally different. So it's harder for me to say that now. I mean, it really is. At one time, before he became more controversial, at one time I thought Jaden Smith, not Justice Smith, the guy who Jaden Smith. Justice Smith always struck me as his best friend Mike, But again, all these people are now grown, So that is a hard question. Right now, I don't know anybody. I think right now I would let go of it and I would leave that to a casting director. Surprise me. Let me sit in there, bring them in, and let me hear them. Let me get a sense for them, and let me react to them. Because I'll know once I hear and see the person.
That's a fair answer, I think, because you could think of 1,000 different people. It'll be that one person that says, "Oh, I was wrong 999 times." This one person just knocked it out the park.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that being said, my friend, for the listeners of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday that would like to learn more about your books and your projects and what's coming next, because you also do conventions too. And I know this episode is going to come out a little bit later in the year, but where can they find out more about you and where are you going to be? Let's just say in 2025.
Oh, in 2025, I haven't decided in 2025. I know there are plans for me and Javier. You mentioned Javier. We are going to do Dragon Con. So we'll be at Dragon Con. That'll be my first year there as a author. I've been there as an attendee. I've been there as a volunteer. That's always good. So that's the first one that we know we're going to do in 2025. This year, before the end of the year, I'm doing Conjuration next month, which is here in Atlanta. That focuses on fantasy books. I'll be at Multiverse Con also here or actually in Peachtree City now. And that's this coming week. We actually got a countdown for that. In terms of where you can find me, you can go to johndarrbooks.com. All the information about all my books and all my audio books are there. We're on, and it's at John Darr Books on Instagram and Twitter, so and even Facebook. So you can find me. Look, there aren't too many people, so I was able to get all of those. So it's at John Darr Books on those platforms too. But I think the best place to go is johndarrbooks.com. It has all the links for everything. It has excerpts from all the books, and so you can get everything there.
Awesome. And all the links to your website and your books will definitely on the once I release the episode on the episode description. And also when I promote the episode, it'll be there on all my socials. And my friend, one day our journey, we're gonna cross paths, we're gonna meet each other, shake hands. And I'd love to have you come back. And what we'll do is let's bring a few friends with us and let's talk some sci-fi. Let's do a 3-hour sci-fi marathon. We're gonna get on there. We're gonna get comfortable, get our popcorn and my Coke Zero. We're gonna go at it.
Oh yes. You're a man after my heart. Coke Zero. Oh, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego, Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. Please check us out on all our social media pages. Catch us on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
All content on this broadcast is a property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. The information shared on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.